Welcome to AI Trailblazers, Voices of Healthcare Innovators. I'm Matthew Ramsey.
I'm Emily Joe.
Pranav Mehta. As artificial intelligence transforms healthcare, we're engaging with today's leaders to uncover their groundbreaking work, learn from their visionary insights, and inspire the next generation to drive transformative efforts through the ongoing technological revolution in healthcare.
We are thrilled to welcome Dr. Josh Denny, CEO of NIH's All of Us research program and a visionary leader at the forefront of AI-driven precision medicine. With a distinguished background in biomedical informatics, Dr. Denny has revolutionized genomics research by harnessing the power of AI, big data, and electronic health records. As the founding director of Vanderbilt's Center for Precision Medicine, he pioneered groundbreaking innovations like genome-wide and phenome-wide association studies, which leverage AI to uncover genetic variations linked to diseases and traits.
Under his leadership, All of Us, a transformative initiative aiming to gather data from over 1 million different diverse patients, is integrating these advanced technologies to tailor medical treatments to individual genetics, lifestyles, and environments, reshaping the future of personalized healthcare for all populations. Today, we'll dive into Dr. Denny's groundbreaking work on GWAS and PheWAS, where advanced AI models analyze vast genomic and EHR data to unlock new insights into disease prevention, treatment, and personalized care. Without further ado, Dr. Denny, welcome. We're so honored to have you.
My pleasure. It's great to be here.
Well, to begin, we would just love to hear a little bit more about your background. So can you share a little bit more about your background with precision health, EHRs, AI, and now the NIH?
That's a lot of topics. Well, I'll say that I started in a road of loving science and math and computer science as I went through high school. And when I went to college, I was really weighing between doing computer science or doing pre-med and molecular biology. I decided to do molecular biology, but had this side interest and minor in computer science. And as I went into med school, and had that, exposure in my third year of med school, just seeing patients and realizing so much of what we were doing. I was fortunate to be at a place that had electronic medical records. So much of what we were doing is something that computers could do better than what a human could do. In addition, we weren't doing anything that learned across patients. Every patient was, in a time transformative, a single medical record. Which meant that you could do things like Dr. A knowing the allergy that Dr. B knew about. And that was transformational in the 1990s. But we didn't learn across patients. And I think that was a real opportunity. There's a famous quote by a former HHS Secretary, Tommy Thompson, that my grocery store is more advanced than my hospital. And I wanted to do something that could make a difference in that space. Really just driven by curiosity, driven by the patients I saw in front of me, that we could make a difference. And so that led to me after taking first a year off in medical school to do research in informatics space, and then after residency, doing a fellowship in informatics. And my career then has been marked by, a split between research and clinical practice at Vanderbilt until 2020, and then moving to the NIH in 2020 to take over the All of Us research program. And it's been just a progression of how we can look at getting care more precise and better the first time for our patients. And I think big data, artificial intelligence, these are tools that we can help augment what a provider does to make care better for patients. And so it's always been about that, what we can do to make that care better.
That's as a second year medical student looking into EHRs and how AI is changing things today. That's a pretty interesting thing to hear. I feel that we're in a similar moment, same way you saw EHRs then, we might be seeing AI today. Can you speak a little bit more, if you were saying to that second year student like yourself who decided to do the gap year, if you were to grab one skill as a medical student, what would you say that would be the best thing to grab right now?
I think one of the best skills is to follow your curiosity, to ask questions and see what's in front of you, and not be scared by the skills you may not have, but to tackle the problems you see that are important. I do believe that problems are more important than the methods that we're trying to solve, and then you try to figure out the methods that you can find or maybe develop in order to solve the problems. You are all going through medical school in a astounding time. I think I was. Again, I'll say very fortunate to be at a medical school where we had started to collect the data and we had built our homegrown EHR. So it was a bunch of text files that you could write a parser to parse and then put those into databases that you could do something with. Now the big data is all there. And so the questions are what can you ask? So I think in my medical school career, I noticed I had a personal sense of unease about what I wanted to do next in my career after doing third year. And there were problems I saw that maybe I had some ability maybe to help tackle. And then that led to doing something a little bit unusual at the time. But I think now quantitative physicians would be very common. And I think it's the most needed space actually out there. Someone who understands the mathematical approaches, computer science approaches across, as well as the healthcare aspects and how you can talk to a patient. And early in the adoption of electronic health records, we saw that some providers were very upset about the interruption to the patient-physician contact and the interview. But what we also found is the providers who were the most familiar and comfortable with the technology had their patients felt just fine with having the technology in the room. And so if you can come in as a provider and leverage the technology kind of seamlessly with what you're doing and have a comfort with it and understand that the patient is three-dimensional, it's an augmentation, you can alleviate their fears if they have them about it, your patients will appreciate it too. I think that's what the lessons of the past are, is how do we as providers help our patients have comfort with the technologies we're bringing into the clinic with us. And then I think that will ultimately lead to, again, better care and help us discover things. I am motivated by things like the diagnostic odysseys. I saw them as a provider, the patient I couldn't figure out that I knew was different. That led to an exploration of genomics, other ways that we could look at these problems. The fact that you see a patient that even with a cluster of 3 diseases, may be the only time you ever see that patient. If you add 3 or 4 or 5 conditions, that may be the only time that patient appears in your medical record. And it certainly isn't in a textbook. And so when that happens, you need huge numbers to start figuring that out. We are always applying different kinds of knowledge to how we solve and think about our patients. The clinical trials are helpful, but the clinical trials answer very narrow questions. And when you're actually solving and thinking about a patient in front of you, you have to bring all sorts of data into that question that we don't necessarily have evidence for. And that's what we're trying to generate evidence for through programs like All of Us, through electronic health records and all the kinds of knowledge that we can bring to bear through. We talk about AI and LLMs and technologies like that we could, see a future of those integrated with our electronic health records more and more seamlessly.
Yeah, we definitely agree. It definitely is going to require a more interdisciplinary and collaborative approach in a sense to get towards this new model of precision health. And so that's actually a great segue into our next topic. You're at the forefront of doing work in precision medicine, and we want for our listeners, could you tell us how is AI currently being used to enhance precision medicine, and what impact have we seen it already have on improving patient outcomes?
We have 3 billion base pairs in our genome, right? And so just the scale of that data is not like remembering a creatinine value and how to adjust a medicine for it. And quite frankly, we don't understand what most of those variants do. In the latest data release of what we produced through All of Us, it's 250,000 genomes. We've observed variation in 1 billion different locations. And for those 1 billion places where we've seen variation, 2/3 of those were not in some of these common aggregates of just genotypes out there. 275 million weren't even ever seen and recorded in dbSNP, which is another catalog. And so what do those do? We don't know. And so we'll require massive approaches to try to figure this out. The real power of something like All of Us is, we have healthcare data, we have surveys, we have lots of ways to start to figure out what these impact of these variants might be. So in terms of how we bring this into care, I'll give you an example patient. So this is a real patient that we had at Vanderbilt. An individual came in with her, she had chest pain, had a family history of heart disease. She had a heart attack. She was stented. She was started on clopidogrel, standard of care. But over the course of 11 months, she had multiple stent closures and restenting. Really, in 11 months, she, had 5 catheterizations, I think 9 stents placed. And what was found at the end of that is she was a poor metabolizer for the drug that the enzyme that activates clopidogrel. And so this is a real world example of, if you knew that genetic status up front and you knew that she doesn't process and activate clopidogrel day one, then you can prescribe the right drug the first time and you hopefully avoid those complications. And that's just a very tangible example. So at Vanderbilt, we built a program that intercepted and predicted who might need one of those medicines in the future using a bunch of clinical factors. And then we would genetically test them, have those genotypes embedded in the chart, so that if it came time for you to prescribe a patient one of these medicines, it could basically tell you which one to do and would intercept that order, recommend an alternative medication if needed, and obviously hope for better outcomes is the desire there. And you can show that these kinds of programs actually can lead to better outcomes and save cost as well, because you get to use, in a lot of people, old medicines that might be cheap, and in this case, and then use the newer medicines that are genetically targeted, tailored for the patient when you need to. And what we find is people don't actually tailor medications to a patient automatically. Physicians don't really know the right thing to do when you talk about these places where there's equipoise and what to do clinically. And so things like these more advanced approaches to what we'd call clinical decision support to kind of help you do the right thing do lead to better outcomes, and that's where it's needed. Now you can now even think about, there's new and more technologies that will come out there. We're behind in medicine in terms of the application of cutting edge technologies like LLMs. Anyway, where were we? I'll let you ask your next question.
No, I mean, I think it's great. This potential vision of, we're talking about how we still need to catch up. Healthcare still needs to catch up to the technology and the potential implications, right? This can improve clinical workflow, CDSS, patient outcomes. But what comes with all the new data that we're talking about, Dr. Denny, is there's so much concern right now also about how do we know we can trust the data? How do we know we can trust the models? And so we wanted to ask you, what do you find are the main challenges when trying to use AI for precision medicine, including things like being able to trust the data, and how do we overcome this?
It's a great question, how we trust the data and how we improve that. So I'll give you an example of I can give you 2 examples of AI that I can think of. Back a long time ago, we were building algorithms to figure out, just from the electronic health record, who had colorectal cancer. And what we found is we developed this algorithm, and it was predicting with an AUC, an area under the receiver operator characteristic curve, of basically 100%. It was like a perfect algorithm. It was like, there's no way this is working so well. And what we found is it had learned the format of how one particular doctor in their template wrote Tmax, the maximum temperature, of that like inpatient day. And that was such a distinctive format, and this person's template was used in all the colorectal cancer patients. And so, what that was a real insight to me, and this was the first time I really got the potential fragility of a machine learning approach, was, this is not robust to anything. This is not robust to this doctor changing the format of his template, but yet it was perfectly predictive. Another example, the first paper actually that came out of all of us was a machine learning approach to predict who might need surgery for glaucoma. They took an algorithm developed at one site, University of California, San Diego, and it worked pretty well. And they brought it into the All of Us resource with 14 or plus different electronic health record systems, numerous different populations across the country and health systems and insurers and all this kind of stuff. And the algorithm basically worked no better than random chance. The AUC was 0.5. So that basically is like a flip of a coin. And so, but then they took the same basic, structure, the same machine learning approaches, and basically fed it the same kind of data and trained it on all of us. And then they again got what actually turned out to be a robust algorithm that worked across, a much more diverse population. And it's not just, of course, diversity in terms of we think about racial or ethnic populations, identities, but also, of course, EHR systems, insurers, geographies, coding rules that might happen in different systems, et cetera. And it's more likely to learn real things. So I think there's a couple really important points to this is we have to ensure that underlying data that we're using to feed an algorithm is we would say trustworthy, but how? So that means it's got to involve a diverse population. It's going to be similar to the populations you're going to deploy it in. And it has to be across all the axes that you might want to consider. We can't, and so you have to know something about the application environment as well as the training environment for such a kind of system. Then you have to figure out ways that you test and monitor it over time, I think are important as well. Transparency when you can is certainly helpful. And then discoverability of kind of some of the backtracking of what its sources are and things like that are important. It's great when you can look up those primary references and things like that. I'll say this is the same kind of thing we do with decision support back in the old days. You're going to tell someone to transfuse someone for a certain hematocrit. It's great if you put that reference in there of why you made that choice.
Yeah, kind of along those lines of what you mentioned before about how it's really important to have a diverse, I guess database. And we completely agree that collecting data, even in clinical trials, there's a lack of diversity and mistrust in the healthcare system. We'd love to learn more about how the All of Us program aims to build a diverse research cohort, and can you tell us more about what the specific steps are that the All of Us program takes to ensure equitable representation of diverse groups in its research?
Yeah, it's so important. All of us is seeking to close a gap that has persisted and actually, in some cases, increased over time. So the goal of the All of Us research program is to accelerate precision medicine and individualized care for the entire population, for all of us inclusively. And we start by wanting to build relationships with at least 1 million participants as partners with us in the program that really will truly reflect the diversity of the United States. If you look at all genetic studies that had been done and these genome-wide association studies, a big catalog of these, more than 90% of them focus on people of European genetic ancestry. And that number hasn't really changed much in the decades since genome-wide associations got started. In fact, for a while, it actually got less diverse. We're not quite as bad in clinical trials. We actually do a little bit better in clinical trials, but there's a gap there too. And so we set out from the beginning thinking at both a scientific and an ethical imperative to think of all of us differently and how we could be represented. So we started with something like focus groups in cities all across the country, asking questions about, what does precision medicine mean? And, people said, not much. I don't know what that means. And so, that's why we're not called the Precision Medicine Initiative Cohort Program anymore. That's why we're called All of Us, because that meant something more. What is valuable to you? They said, by and large, it's about making health better for our populations and our communities and our kids. And how can we do that? But it's also about how do you tell us what you're doing? What's the return of value? Can you share data from what you learn, and you're going to share from your studies? Simple things like that. In our case, we also want to return things like genetic health results, and we found that that was what people were most interested in. So we started with engagement, deliberate, inclusive, across the country. We have more than 100 community partners, many of which are national entities that link with many local groups that engage diverse populations. We also, of course, partner with a number of healthcare centers across the country to carry this message out. We have participants, community partner representatives, patient advocates in all levels of governance of the program. And from the initial writing of the blueprint for the program, which I was involved with, and to now, that's a key part of the program. My advisory panel, which is an external counsel to us, has patient advocates and community leaders on it. We have members from HBCUs and assorted Black schools of medicine as well, as part of that. And so, we need to have all these voices. And there's an African proverb that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think that that's a key part of what we believe as well. Is it's really important to have those voices at the table in what you're doing, to acknowledge that science hasn't always been trustworthy, and to try to build that trust deliberately, working with areas like Macon County, where the U.S. Public Health Service study on syphilis was done in the Tuskegee area, working with the Henrietta Lacks family and having them as partners in the program, just going deliberately to these different groups. And we've worked for the last couple of years with tribal engagement with American Indian, Alaska Native communities, and talking about what's important, how do we do this in a way that's recognizes the differences of your communities, the values, and the historical wrongs that have been done in there, and just be truthful about it. So I think that's a really important part of building those relationships. We have over 800,000 folks that have joined All of Us right now. I encourage anyone listening to join All of Us. It's open to anyone 18 or over at this point. We're starting to enroll kids as well. And then those data are available to do research. Of those, actually about 87% identify as an underrepresented population in biomedical research. That's not just race and ethnicity. That includes disabilities, living in a rural location, being a sexual gender minority, and other measures of being potentially underrepresented by medical research.
Yeah, we love the intentionality your team is making to make sure that All of Us is inclusive and community inclusive. It's really fantastic to see. Could you tell us, what's your favorite moment or project or experience leading the efforts of All of Us, of the All of Us program?
Wow, that's a great question. Well, a lot of times there's so much excitement at the beginning. And when these first ideas came out, that was a lot of excitement of what the potentiality for something like this could be. Because before this, the United States didn't have some sort of national cohort that was available, and different healthcare systems built their own research cohorts, or different people built their studies. But it was an opportunity to think differently. And we were encouraged by then NIH Director Francis Collins to, really try to solve some of the problems that weren't being solved. And so, you asked about diversity, but that was deliberate. It wasn't an accident, and it wasn't necessarily, going to happen unless we decided to make it happen, right? And so there are lots of decisions like that got made at the beginning, that some of which I feel like seemed pretty impossible. Maybe we didn't believe we could do them at the time. And I think that the teams we put together, everyone's bought into the mission, and we are able to accomplish them. And I think that it's really the partnership of so many people. And I think another moment I'll come back to is maybe coming back together as a consortium which includes participants. We always invite them as well. We obviously can't have all of them. It's a subset, but together after COVID was really great to kind of come back together and just look at our 5-year. At that point, our 5-year anniversary of what we accomplished and build together. You cross that 500,000 number when you start releasing those genomes, when you start returning those results to people. We're now getting these stories of people's whose lives are, actually being changed. I mean, and potentially saved because of the genetic results that we're returning to them. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Denny, we're getting close to the end of our time. We loved your paper on precision medicine in 2030, and we highly recommend to anyone in our audience listening, go check that out. You can find it on PubMed or just Google it. But we would love to hear a little bit about your perspective on the future. So for the leaders and the future leaders in precision medicine, what is the biggest piece of advice that you have to make sure that we're having a great impact with these powerful AI tools, and you're taking full advantage of knowing these new patterns and having all of this powerful technology at our fingertips?
Medicine has changed a lot, even just in the time that I've seen it, and it will change a lot in the time that you see it. I think for my time, some of the huge changes were electronic health records, imaging becoming much more ubiquitous, and a lot more testing that you could get. I think right now, what's going to happen is you're going to have more of a kind of a digital test. You will get your genome once in the future, and it will be reinterpreted periodically, and our knowledge will increase, and also our understanding of what someone's health trajectory will increase. The impact of a genetic variant will have to have a much more nuanced view of it, from the understanding of something being pathogenic or not to a risk factor, and as you go through life, that changes, and you'll have the technology to look at the health trajectory and pull in. I'm talking about genomics, but it will become it'll be other types of omics that come to that mix. We haven't really thought much about the environment, and I think the environment is a huge play, and I think I expect that we will learn something dramatic about something in the environment that we probably change over the next decades. There are huge health problems in front of us that will be tackled and addressed and may change. I mean, one of the huge ones right now that influences more than half of all clinic visits in one study we did were related to complications of obesity. And that may be something that is solved a decade from now. I mean, we have pointers to it now. And just like we are kind of solving, I would argue most of hyperlipidemia is a solved problem now too. So what is the future as we get there? You will be part of that, and I think you'll stop talking about hypertension, or just like we don't really talk about hyperlipidemia quite as much anymore. We talk about all the components of it, and we think about genetic causes and dietary and these kinds of things, and we get deeper into genetic causes. That's what cancer is fundamentally, is a genetic disease. I think we will be breaking down not type 1 and type 2 diabetes, but so many more kinds of things. So as a future providers in this list, I think of you all will, with that comfort of technology in front of you, not hesitating to ever adopt something new while making sure you prove that it's making your patients better. Have a high bar of that. Never fearing the new thing or preserving turf, but how do you do the best for your patient, and learning the skills that you can to accomplish the things in front of you. I think, and then partnering and being in teams. I think we will be able to bond with our patients, be there for the patient, and give them better care. and seek a better life for all of us in ways for the next decades that will be incredibly exciting, and new ways of doing medicine. You're going to do a lot more of it from home, probably on Zoom too, or whatever it's replacing those. Sensors. We didn't talk about sensors. Sensors will be big too. We have.
Well, if you have time, if you want to give a quick blurb about sensors, we'd love to hear it.
I mean, right
we
now,
can cut
right?
that out too.
I can remember. I can remember my first patient that walked in with their Apple Watch and told me that the Apple Watch told them they had AFib, and it was completely wrong. They did not have AFib, but they just had more than normal respiratory variation and beat to beat variation. But but it's the future, is that we will be able to do this kind of stuff. And so, gosh, if you have one doctor's visit a year, that's less than 1,000th of your year that you have in that visit, right? And that's saying you spend a lot of time at the doctor. And so the most of healthcare happens outside of the hospital. So this closes the gap some, right? If you can do that, and diabetes care is being transformed this way, why not everything else? So
do we see all? Oh, sorry, I think I'm gonna cut. Do we see all of us taking strides forward with stretchables and wearable technologies and sensors? Is that in the forefront?
Yeah, so we are the world's, as far as I know, the world's largest open data set that's got wearable data in it. We're going to have a release out in about a week and a half that will have, I think it's 59,000 people have Fitbit data, which is small compared to other numbers, but huge in terms of what's out there.
So exciting, especially for the space of predictive analytics, real-time monitoring, right? Those are things that are going to improve healthcare efficiency if the data is used properly. And so, we're so inspired. Dr. Denny, thank you so much for joining us today on AI Trailblazers. It's been inspiring to learn about the transformative power of AI and precision medicine, the future directions that all of us is taking, and your intentionality as a leader towards championing health equity through our evolving healthcare landscape. As we've seen today, the future of healthcare is not just about innovation, it's about creating a more personalized, data-driven, and equitable system for all. Experts like Dr. Denny are paving the way for a future where AI unlocks new possibilities for treatment and care, reshaping lives and community.
We hope today's conversation has sparked new ideas and a deeper understanding of how AI is revolutionizing medicine. Stay tuned for more thought-provoking discussions and the trailblazers who are driving this change. Until next time, keep exploring the frontier of AI and medicine.